This is Crick Buzz Chatter. Adam Collins, Harsha Bogle ahead of the Boxing Day Test match at Melbourne. And boy, as a Melburnian, it feels very good to be saying the Boxing Day Test match at Melbourne after COVID in 2020. For such a long period of time, Harsha, we did not think there would be a Test match at Melbourne. As it happens, as we're starting to talk now, we've just received a statement from Cricket Australia talking about the Sydney Test match next week, whether that might be possible. They're doing everything in their power to keep things as they were in the schedule. But these are the times we live in one of the most extraordinary years, well, in human history, really.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I have such happy memories of being at Boxing Day Tests, but the biggest buzz actually comes from about almost a kilometer away from the MCG, where people are so excited about going to the Boxing Day Test that you get caught up in the spirit of the game itself. They're coming out of trams, they're crossing that little bridge to come there, they're walking from wherever they are, the car parks are full. Everybody's talking cricket.
2 years ago, this corresponding fixture was where Australia plumbed their deepest depths in 2018. It was the end of their most horrible year. And for India's perspective, it was a tremendous success, bowling out Australia for 151. Jasprit Bumrah, 6 for 33. What a triumph it was. And there's such happy memories for this Indian touring side, albeit without Virat Kohli, who's gone home to be at the birth of his first child.
It was probably the best spell bowled by an Indian in Australia. I mean, there've been a few, not as many as great innings, because Australia is a great batting country. But I think that Bumrah's spell was fantastic. Bumrah, Shami, Ishant was a fantastic combination. We've now got to see if Bumrah, Yadav, and as I'm almost certain it will be Mohammad Siraj, will be able to recapture the same form, the same mood, exert the same pressure. So yeah, look how much things change in 2 years. You talked about things changing in a few months with COVID. Cricket-wise, things have changed a lot too.
Yeah, I think that's fair. The cricketing world has changed. The power balance has changed as well from where Australia were to where they are now, according to the two ICC charts, if you like, the World Test Championship and the overall rankings. Australia are number one. I don't think anyone would actually say they are emphatically the best team in the world as yet. They're still a work in progress, but so many strides have been taken under the leadership of Tim Paine. And look, as a consequence, their selection is pretty straightforward. David Warner's not fit, and therefore, same 11. Different story for India, though, Harsha, where, I mean, you've foreshadowed Siraj could make his debut at Test level, but it seems like any number of combinations could be put together for India's top 7.
I mean, I've been looking at the numbers. There's really two changes that India need to be focused at. Two mandatory changes. Who comes in place of Virat Kohli? Who comes in place of Mohammad Shami? And I think both are given. I think both those could be announced in a 10-word press release. Shubman Gill for Virat Kohli. That's 5 words. Mohammad Siraj for Mohammad Shami. The issues then come with all the others. What do you do with Prithvi Shaw? What do you do with Wriddhiman Saha? Now, here's something interesting. All along, the stated plan was Wriddhiman Saha keeps wickets in India. Where the ball turns, you need a keeper who's very good standing up. Rishabh Pant keeps away. We saw that in the West Indies. We saw that in New Zealand. He keeps away. He bolsters the batting. Suddenly, that has changed. And Rishabh Pant, over the last 18 months, every day virtually has been told that he's a different person. He was first a T20 player, then he was an ODI player, then he was a Test player, then he was number 4 for India at the World Cup, then he became a Test player again, then he was dropped again. I don't think Rishabh Pant gets up in the morning and apart from his name knows exactly who he is. But having done that, they made Saha. What did it do to Saha? He tried to bat like Pant because he thought that's what is required. And that's not who Saha is. So if you change Saha today and bring Pant back, it means that your decision making for the first test wasn't absolute enough. So there might be very valid reasons for playing Pant and his batting, even though his batting tends to be all or nothing. But it means that your first decision making was faulty. So it'll be very interesting to see if they admit that, or if they say, no, we think our original decision was right and we'll go with Saha.
I'm sure it won't surprise you, Harsha, to hear that Justin Langer was interesting in his press conference this afternoon. He always is ahead of a Test match. And one small comment, but one that stood out to me, was that they want to put the pressure on Ajinkya Rahane. It's not through a lack of respect, but purely on the basis that Rahane out of runs last week at Adelaide, to the extent to which he did run out his skipper, obviously stepping in for Kohli this week. We've heard in the past when touring teams come to Australia, they target the top man, they target the number 1, and this week it's Rahane. It's going to be a big test for the experienced batsman stepping into Kohli's shoes.
Do you remember Rishabh Pant sledged to Tim Paine in 2018. I think he kept calling him stand-in captain,
Yes.
temporary captain, you remember? I won't be surprised if the Aussies go hard at Ajinkya Rahane, especially because while in the last 8 or 10 test matches averaged 55, you look at the last 3 years, he hasn't really become the batsman a lot of us believe he is. But there's a lot of steel to Ajinkya Rahane, and I'd be very interested in knowing what they've told him, that even if you don't score runs, you are the captain. There's a lot of steel to him. So it's going to be the 3 most significant test matches of Ajinkya Rahane's career. Of that, I have no doubt at all.
Yeah, we're talking a lot about captains and glovemen today. The merger of those two is Tim Paine. And Justin Langer, again, made an interesting comment today that Tim Paine is Australia's most important player. He just said it outright. As far as the 3 roles that he plays, man of the match last week for principally his batting, unbeaten 73 in that train wreck of an Australian first innings. Of course, I suppose in context, it wasn't quite so bad given what happened the day afterwards, but it still didn't go very well. And Paine was the last man standing. His captaincy and the leadership. Remember, since they lost in Melbourne in 2018, sure, they lost a couple of test matches in England, but retained the Ashes. They won everything last year against Pakistan and New Zealand, and they won last week. So as far as leadership's going, a big tick in that box, and his glove work is still exemplary. So Tim Paine, his stocks continue to grow at age 36.
I saw the stats the other day. I looked at the batting numbers thereafter. And what have we been told over the years? Rod Marsh was a tough, gutsy, battling batsman. Brad Haddin was a very good batsman. Tim Paine, we're not quite sure. Tim Paine averaged 34. You could say that that Paine's playing against lesser bowling, but every generation, once it passes, the bowling in their generation was the greatest ever. So you've got to give a little leeway for that. Tim Paine 34, Brad Haddin 32, Rod Marsh 26, 27. I mean, you could say Marsh's 26 against that West Indies lineup was 35. Now you can budget for all that. But if your number 7 is averaging 34, I'm closing my eyes and I'm saying move on. I'm not even thinking of a replacement. My number 7 gives me 34 average. I'm taking it every single day of the year.
Absolutely. And Harsha, in closing, one question that I keep receiving when doing radio interviews and so on between these 2 test matches is that do India have the steel to bounce back from 36 all out in Adelaide? And my response tends to be fairly diplomatic as far as the way this Indian side have bounced back over the last few years and how well they're led by Virat Kohli and the steel they generally play with. But what's your perspective on that fundamental question as we head up towards Boxing Day?
2 things before we finish today. On the issue that you said, if I was in that dressing room, and we've all been, Adam, you've seen difficult times in life. I've seen tough times in life. You've got to tell yourself the worst is over. It cannot get worse than this. There's only one way from here, and that is up. But I would also say at the end of 6 sessions, it was a 7.5 session test match. After 6 sessions, India were ahead. That means in 6 tough sessions, you actually were, even if on points, you were ahead. You got knocked out in the 5th round, but after 4 rounds, you were still ahead. That is what I would be saying. Part of the reason they were ahead, of course, was Kohli 74. That's not available to you. I think I'd love there to be a discussion on Prithvi Shaw as well. What are they going to do with Shaw? Because it comes back to the Pant and Saha decision. Did you pick Shaw because you were convinced that he is your either number 1 or number 2 opening batsman? If that is the reason you picked him, then you've got to stay with him. But if you think that mentally he's not in the right place, that he doesn't believe he can score a run, he's walking out believing he's going to get out, then you change him. So I'd be very interested in knowing if they show faith in Shaw. That is the one decision that only those people who are close to Shaw, who are seeing him in the nets, can take. It's a very tough call for us on the outside to say, but if he's got out the same way twice and he's not looked like touching a ball, there is a problem there. It's just that then you've got to decide whether Gill opens, whether Rahul bats in the middle order, which is why I talked about the turbulence that this Indian team faces, which is not something you want.
Well, on Boxing Day 2020, the good news is the tradition continues, as does Cricket Buzz Chatter. Join us every single night live. Adam Collins, Harsha Bogle will be here throughout, and I cannot wait.